Can you stop chewing with your mouth open in front of the microphone? Chat, I will do what I want to do. This is my stream. I'm not 5 years old. You're not my mom. You can't tell me what to do. This is what I'm eating. I think you guys can see it, right? Can you guys see it? It's like I'm just eating some tomatoes. So we're eating some tomatoes. This is the lunch of champions. So all right. So e4, c5. We play open Sicilian just like we did last game. Daniil plays e5 today. Yesterday he played pawn to d6 when we played the rouser. Today he decided to play pawn to e5. So he played what we call the Shevchnikov opening. It's an opening that's been around a long time. Now, one thing that I thought was very amusing is that Peter Lecko has been doing some of the commentary on Chess24, and he's been doing some of the commentary. One thing that I thought was it's just when I recall in my memory is that I remember when I was very young, I would wake up very early. The games were in Europe, so I'd wake up early and watch some of Garry Kasparov's games. And so one of the games I remember very fondly was maybe like 1998 or 99 when Garry Kasparov had the white pieces against Peter Lecko in Linares, and they played this Shevchnikov Sicilian with knight b5, d6, knight d5 takes, and c3. So I remember when I was very young, I would wake up early and watch a lot of these games. And specifically, I would do it because essentially I just wanted to watch what the top guys were playing. And to give you an idea of how different it is, I remember I'd wake up and I would watch it on one of these chess sites, but then I would also like watch the like really bad like webcam, which was like, I don't know, like 5 FPS or something that they would have. So I would always get up really early and watch these games. So did I watch it on Twitch? Good one, yeah. But that was like the early days of webcams, to put it mildly. So I remember there was a game Garry Kasparov against Peter Lecko in this. I think the game was a draw, but anyway, I decided to play this very positional line where White gives up the bishop pair, but he gets a jumbo horse on d5 on this fantastic outpost. So Daniil plays rook b8, bishop g5, play a4, knight b4, goes bishop d7. I take, he castles, and the point here is that basically White's going to end up exchanging the pawns here with b3, and we reached sort of the starting position, the crux of everything, where you have even material. Both players have 5 pawns. White has 5, black has 5. Black has dos bishops, and White has a bishop and a horse. So it's even material, but you have the jumbo knight, and you also long-term have this outside pass pawn here that can run up the board. So essentially, what happens here is it's a positional struggle over whether White can make use of this outside pass pawn or whether Black can successfully blockade it. So he goes queen e8, I castle, he goes bishop d8, go b5. Again, this is a very nuanced idea, this bishop d8, but the reason is that if at some point I ever push the pawn, let's say we reach some position like this, if the bishop is on this diagonal, it's just staring at open space and it doesn't attack anything. But by putting the bishop on d8, what happens is, let's say we reach this position, you'll notice that the bishop on b6, it's perfect. It targets everything on this diagonal, but it also stops my pawn from getting to the end of the board as well. So the reason behind bishop d8 is long term, you want to put the bishop on this diagonal rather than having it on this empty diagonal where it's like a very, very broken wooden shield. So now I go b5, he plays f5. If Black were to play bishop takes pawn, I can go rook f to b1 here. And now if Black takes the bishop, I eat the rook on b8, and Black has a bishop and a pawn for a rook, but I still have this jumbo knight on d5 that is doing really, really well. So, and if Black doesn't move the bishop, I'm just going to take because I have 1, 2, 3, and Black has 1, 2 to defend the bishop on b5. So he goes f5 here, I take. Now Daniil can take the pawn here, because after, if I go rook at b1, now Black can take the bishop on c4, and after queen takes rook, he can take the horse. So he gets a bishop and a horse in return for giving up the rook on b8, because by removing this pawn, by capturing here, I no longer have the pawn on e4 to guard this knight on d5. So I play rook f d1. Daniil plays bishop h4, trying to break the pin here, because now, let's say I just play some move, he can move away because he's guarding with the rook and the queen, whereas before there's nothing guarding because the bishop's in the way of the rook. So he goes here, I trade, I go queen a4, and we kind of reach another position that's very tricky. I still have this really nice knight outpost, can't be removed, but I'm also hitting the bishop and I'm potentially hitting the rook. So it's a very dicey situation here, because if black just moves the bishop away from the danger, I go knight here, and I hit the rook, and I queen, and this is a nice fork, which should just win the game. And so and black also can't move the queen to guard the bishop, because then he loses the rook. So the only way to prevent losing material here is to play what Danil finds the game, which is bishop d8. So now not only do I not attack the bishop, but I also don't have the fork, and the queen still guards the rook. So bishop d8 is a very nice move. So I go knight c3. He plays rook a5. Only move, we trade. Wasn't c4 better than a4? I don't know. I thought queen c4 allowed some trick. I thought he could go bishop d8. And if I play like rook a8, he goes rook c5. Now, mind you, after queen e4, this might still be very good. And objectively, I agree with you guys. This would have been better, because the drawing chances are much lower. Because what happens in the game is that I win an extra juicer here, but this should be a technical draw if black trades the bishop for the knight. I was very surprised during the game that Danil did not do this, because after bishop takes d6, rook takes bishop, currently I have one extra pawn, but black can make a draw here with king g8, and after king f1, he can go king to f7, and if king e2, he can just play rook to a8 and rook a2, and this should be a draw with correct play. I can obviously get some kind of endgame where I'm up one pawn, but it will be a draw long term. So Danil plays rook f8, and I think Danil's thought here was that essentially the only way to keep the pawn is to go g4, and after g4 h5, if I take the pawn, now he trades, he takes here, and this is a very easy draw. I'm up one pawn, but split pawns, like in bowling, you don't want to split pawns or the split pins. So after g4 h5, I would try to keep it intact with h3, but then after pawn takes, he pushes the pawn, I take, and then he just trades, and after rook d6, rook f4, once again, very easy draw. I do it, the pawns are connected, but I'm going to lose this one, and I'm also going to lose this one, and this is a theoretical draw. So Danil plays rook f8, thinking he can make the easy draw, so I go knight c4, and after takes, I play knight takes pawn, and now black cannot capture the knight because of rook d8 check, and after rook e8, rook takes bishop f8, rook f8. This is, of course, the patented ice skater. Using correct terms, we don't use these weird XQC terms like back rank checkmate or all this weird stuff that he started saying in recent weeks. We call it what it actually is. And so this is just checkmate. Note, by the way, if it were black's move, he would also be able to play rook down and checkmate the king. So knight takes e5, so black plays h5, creates luft, so now I can take, because if I check, the king goes up one square. So I go knight f3, and now this, by the way, you guys, is also a theoretical draw. It's rook knight and 3 pawns against rook bishop 2, all on the same side. So with correct play, this should be a draw, but it is very hard when you're down on the clock and you're down a pawn here, because the horse is always very tricky. It can always jump every which way. So we play a couple of moves, nothing really to talk about here. Finally, I get black to push this pawn, and now the idea is I want to jump to f4 and fork everything, create the quadruple fork against the king, the rook, and the 2 juicers. He goes rook d7, knight f4, king here. Caballo, yes, the Caballo, yeah. This is not technically winning. This is a draw with correct play. But I did get one moment in this endgame where I could have won. So here he goes rook b7. We just play a bunch of random moves all over the board. And now finally Danil makes a mistake. He lets me get the setup with the 3 connected pawns here. So it's still 3 versus 2. The only way to win this would be to exchange and then win this pawn, because there would be no support. So he plays some more moves. And yes, and this is the one moment, you guys, where I had the win. Every other moment during this game, it was always within the range where it could have been a draw. But this was the one moment that I could have gone rook g5 and I win the game, because I'm threatening to play knight f5 and fork the rook and the king. So you can't play like a bishop move, because then I go check and I win the rook. And if you were to say move the king over this way, then I go f5 and I break the chain. I break the pawns. And after you take, I just go knight takes, say rook f7, rook h5, rook g5, and I keep my 2 pawns connected, and it's an easy win. So rook g5 would have been, this was the one moment when I would have been winning the game. Levy saw it and he was sad that I didn't. Well, good for Levy. He should be a GM though, to be fair. So I am glad that Levy saw it. And if king goes anywhere, I break the pawns. Like, you split the pawns, they can't protect each other, and it's winning. But the computer saw it. Yes, the computer saw it. What a surprise. What a surprise the computer saw it. Okay, so I missed this move, and unfortunately, once I missed this one win, there was never any chance to win the game, because I basically just wander all over the board, and the main reason I can't ever win is because I can never split the pawn in a way where I'm going to capture this pawn on the next move, and black will be able to come down and attack these two pawns down here on g3 and h4. So I play here, play some more moves, and now I blunder with king e5. Terrible move. What I should have done was I should have gone king f3, king g2, king h3, gone and gotten my afternoon tea, just play like rook here, check, king here, and reset and just chill out, get my afternoon tea, relax, and then try to find another setup with the knight and the rook where I can attack the pawns on g6 and h5. However, I play king e5. Now Danil correctly sees rook a3. And now it's just a draw, because I can't actually block with the rook, because then he trades, and now he skewers my king and my knight, and I would actually lose the game here. Or maybe not, because it's, well, wrong color bishop, but anyway, whatever. So I go rook c8, bishop a5, now I go f5. If I were to play rook a8 to try and pin the bishop and the rook, unfortunately he goes bishop here, creates the fossil, hits my king, and when I take the bishop, he eats the rook on a8. So I can't go rook a8, so I go f5, he takes, I take, he checks, I go here, he takes. And the other reason this is a draw, by the way, you guys, is because black can always sacrifice the bishop for the pawn. If you have a rook and a horse against a rook, this is a theoretical draw, and it's been known for forever. So bishop e1, I check. He goes here, very critical moment, by the way, not to blunder. If you go king here, you actually lose because of knight e7 check. And now if you go any of these squares, I fossilize you. So like if you go here, I check and I cover the square and I fossilize you. If you go here, I fossilize you as well. And after king g6 is checkmate in one, because knight guards the rook, king covers the square, and that's all she wrote. So it's very critical that black plays king to e8 here, and now I go king e6, and black has rook g6. Note if black tried to go king d8, I would actually checkmate the king, because the knight covers the escape square, and the king holds the two other critical squares. And if black goes king f8, I think I have rook f7, and maybe it's still a draw, but it gets very dicey here after like rook f1. There are all kinds of forks and tricks, and your king is stuck on the back, so it's very, very tricky. It's still a draw, but it's tricky. However, Danil correctly plays rook g6, king f5, rook g1, and now I decide to go rook a1, and we just exchange, and the game ends in a very peaceful draw with a king and a bishop against the king. First game, I put a lot of pressure on Danil. I was very disappointed that I did not win this game, because not only did I have a good position up a pawn, but I also was up about 3 to 4 minutes on the clock. So I was very disappointed. I think it's very tricky, because when you have games like this where you're so close and then you don't take advantage in a short match, it's hard not to feel a little bit of a letdown after that. So I was very disappointed. I was very disappointed, but it happens. So all right, so let's keep moving on. First game was a draw. Let's go to the second game, where I had the black piece. Let me flip the board. C4 e5. We played the English opening. We had this opening. Sorry if I'm going fast, but getting to the critical moment. We had this position at least 4 times in our previous match in the Lindorus Abbey finals. In that match, I started off playing queen c8, but then on the final day, I think I played pawn to c6. So I decided to return to what I played originally, which was queen to c8, because I felt it was more solid. So a4, a5, white plays n peasant. I play rook takes pawn. d4, rook d8, pinning the queen and the pawn, so white cannot capture. And here Danil goes bishop e4, which I think is an original move that I wasn't familiar with. So I play f5, which I think makes a lot of sense here, just to hit the bishop. He goes bishop d3, I play rook a5, and now he plays queen c2. And this is the moment where I have a feeling that with the computer and having a lot of time, I would have been able to come up with something better than what I did in the game. Because one thing that's very different about rapid chess and classical chess is, okay, let's look at the move number. We're on move number 19 here, correct? Move number 19. Queen c2 is move 19. So if you're playing classical chess, normally the time control is that you have to make 40 moves in 2 hours. So what this would mean is that if this was a classical game, I would have 2 hours to make 20 moves until I get another hour on the clock. So if I had 2 hours here, to think, I probably would have been able to use 25 to 30 minutes and come up with a very smooth way of equalizing, probably something like bishop to f6. But in a rapid game where you only have 15 minutes, it's very tricky. You have to know where to use your time. So let's say I use 10 minutes here, for example, and I get into a bad position. Then I'm not only going to have a bad position, I'm also going to have no time on the clock. So you have to balance, you know, it's like the scale. So, all right. So that's why I love rapid chess, because you kind of have to come up with it. It's like at the board, your intuition, your human brain, you have to figure out stuff. You know, it's not as easy. If I had 20 minutes here, I think it'd be much easier to come up with a very smooth approach. But instead, I try to play practical moves, just play quickly. 95. 10 minutes on the clock as opposed to 2 hours, yeah. And this, by the way, is why one of the big issues with classical chess is that when you have 2 hours and you get to move 20, you've got 2 hours, you have too much time. So Daniil plays a5 here. I play pawn to c6. Basically, I need to show you guys Stockfish. You see the evaluation right here. Don't you guys see it? That's the evaluation. So Daniil plays bishop c4, and this game sort of hinges on a couple things. Look at the pawns over here. Everything is very closed. No pawn breaks for either side, really. So everything here hinges around whether black can guard these two pawns without, like, winning this a pawn, but without losing both c6 and b7. Oh, I didn't like a question? What? So takes rook d5. Daniil plays rook c1. Okay, I go back. He goes rook b1. And so we reached this position that originally when we reached the position, I thought it should be a relatively easy draw. It's still even pawns. But white has active rooks, and I have this open line, but the king is very safe with the turtle pawns around it. And even though the king is not a sniper, it's got a very nice home here on g2. So I play h6, we trade, he goes rook c1, I go rook a6. Again, even material, but my pawns are extended. Passive, weak pawn c6, also weak pawns here in the center. So the general rule of thumb, if you're trying to win a game of chess in an endgame, while I was playing the game, was I listening to music? No, you're not allowed to have headphones on, so I was not listening to music. But the general rule of thumb is you need 2 weaknesses, not 1, but 2. Two weaknesses to win the game. So here black has 2 weaknesses. There's a weak pawn, but there's also a weak pawn on f5. So the conditions are there for this to possibly be winning. So we play some more moves. I go rook b6. Now what I really wanted to play here was rook a2, with the idea that if white goes like queen here, I go queen h5 and I get all this activity. The king is very loose on g2. But unfortunately after queen c4, I think white is winning the game here, because now I can't go off because I lose the rook. And if I trade the queens, now I've got the weak pawn, so I go back, and now after pawn to h5, 2 weaknesses, g6, rook c5, and the 2 weaknesses rule the day, and white is winning the game because the pawn chain is attacked at the base, and eventually I'm going to lose all 3. Why won't 1 weakness be enough? Because usually if there's 1 weakness, you can overprotect the 1 weakness, whereas when there are 2 weaknesses, you have to defend side to side and defend both. So it's generally very hard to do that. So I go rook b6. Daniil plays rook c5 again. Look at the aggressive rook here. Attacks both my weaknesses, and it's just a nice solid outpost here. So I go here. He goes here. I go queen here. Now apparently at this position there was a line that was winning. Apparently queen d2. No, apparently rook a5 is winning here for white. Now I don't know why, because I didn't have a chance to look at this in depth during the game. But apparently this was supposed to be winning for some reason. Although after queen g6, I don't know why. It's why Germany lost the war. 2 fronts. Very true. Of course, the German panzers. Yes, the Panzer division. They had to go. They were spread too thin. Yes, this is true. It's a good point. This is why Germany lost the war. But as you guys know, we also don't talk about the war either. No, I said Panzer. The Panzer divisions, not Panzers. But anyway. Okay. Let's be very clear about the game of chess. Chess is a draw. If we played chess with no time limits, every game in chess, professional chess, would be drawn. So let's start with that basis. Chess would be a draw if you have all the time in the world. So if we want chess to be an actual esport, a popular game, you gotta have decisive results. How do you do that? You don't want humans having 2 hours to make like 5 moves. Humans are too good. They can do that. Computers have taught us how to make good moves. So basically what you need is a time limit where people can think, but also where you're gonna see mistakes. The intuition, the pure raw talent will show up as well. So I think like 30 minutes, 25-30 is probably the perfect one. Yes, actually, no, I've heard that joke. But yeah, imagine a 2-hour round of CSGO. So like in CSGO, you'd just be sitting there holding a corner for 2 hours. Would anybody watch that? Or Valorant, same thing. You know, you're sitting there holding the corner for 2 hours with your op. Like, I mean, seriously. Okay, I watched for a minute. Okay, he's still holding the corner. Okay, 5 minutes. I'm gonna go get some tea. Come back. Oops, he's still holding the corner. Like, so yes. Yeah, that's why, again, time. You always need time to matter. Yeah, it's, you know, you always do. Like, I mean, can you imagine just Wardell sitting in a corner with the op? He's just sitting there for all day long, and like, and that just, no one's gonna watch that. All right, so let's get back to the chess. So I don't know why I'm making like, yeah, okay, rook c5, h5, queen c2, queen g6, and now the reason this probably is a draw here is because I still have the 2 weaknesses, but now I've got a grip on the light squares, and my queen can come in and attack the white king as well. So king h2, I go queen g4. Very nice move, because now if white tries to take the pawn, I can trade the pawns and go queen e2. And now I hit the pawn, and white can't guard this pawn with the queen. So white has to bring the king, and no matter where white goes with the king, this actually is a draw, because I just keep checking, and the moment he steps away, I come back, and the queen is just off sides, and it's just a draw. So Danil does not take the pawn. He goes rook a5, tries to keep the dream alive. I go queen f3, again, protect the pawn, but also keep an eye on these squares around the white king. King rook a8, I go rook b3. Now white cannot take the rook, because then I take the pawn, and again, it's just a easy draw. I make a repetition, and I keep putting the white king in check with my queen. So Danil plays rook a1. I go here. Apparently rook d3 is also fine, but I was worried that somehow I was going to end up losing this pawn, like a king g1. And essentially there's no protection of this pawn. So I was a little bit worried to do this, because if somehow white can guard these pawns correctly and pick this one off, then white's probably winning. So I didn't want to allow this. So that's why I decided to go rook b6. Goes king g1, I go queen g4, and now finally Danil decides, you know what, I don't see any way to progress here. I'll just trade the rooks and try to play a queen endgame. White never really gets much, so there's not much to talk about here. Basically, the only way white can win this game is if somehow white can run the king over here and then bring the king in as an attacking piece towards the pawn on c6. But anyway, we play this game, and I decide, you know what, if his king goes back to the safe harbor here on g2, that's fine, but as long as the white king doesn't come this way, he only has one attacker in the queen, and that's not enough to win the game. So Danilo goes queen c5, I go here, he goes queen e5. Again, white can go back with the king, but I basically just check, and this is a draw, or even just check here, king g2. And again, I think I can just go queen a2, bring the queen back to guard. And if white can't touch the base of the pawn chain, then all the pawns are going to be safe forever. So he goes queen e5, and now I go queen a6. I decide to stop him from running back to the safe haven. He goes here, and now I just check him, and the draw ends with a repetition. So this was the second game of the match. A very difficult game. I was in some trouble, but I was able to hold it together and make the draw. So after 2 games, the score is 1-1 with 2 draws. So let's move on to the third game. Congrats on becoming the king of India. What? Is that a joke? What are you talking about? Anyway, we're going to keep going on, so let's move on to the third game. So third game, we play the same opening. Danil repeats it, plays Sveshnikov. We played literally the exact same line. And now I go knight b4, bishop d7. I played b3 this time instead of bishop c4 first. More or less the same kind of position. Now, as I mentioned yesterday, you guys, one thing that's worth noting is that in between the games, everybody has their second. They got their second with their supercomputer doing preparation. And So while the second game was going on, my trainer was looking at this line, trying to come up with some ideas for what I could do in the third game. So when we have our 10-minute break, what we do is when we have our 10-minute break, we just we talk to the people who are helping us, and they give us these little ideas to play in the games. So we trade King H8 again, sidestepping any fossilizations, because F5 there might be some fossils or some tricks. I don't even know, but he goes here, plays Queen E8. Same kind of idea to go Bishop D8. Also to play F5 here and activate the queen along this diagonal. So I go Bishop E2. Do I pay my second a salary? Yes, I do pay him a salary. Yes, I do. I pay him a salary, yeah. I mean, you think people would just do this for free? It's serious work, you guys. It's not... I mean, when people are staying up until like 2 a.m. in the morning doing preparation, you better believe they're getting paid. I mean, come on. So here I go Bishop E2 instead of Bishop C4. Daniil plays F5. Trade, I go B5. Minimum wage salary? No, of course not, you guys. Absolutely out of the question. No, you guys, I've not qualified for the final. I'm up 2-0, but it's a best of 5. Can you stop chewing with your mouth open in front of the microphone? Chat, I will do what I want to do this in my stream. I'm not 5 years old. You're not my mom. You can't tell me what to do. All right. Okay. So anyway, so F5 I trade. I go B5 here. Bishop to E6. Black creates the pin against the queen of the knight. I go Rook A6 to touch the pawn here. Black goes Queen F7. I play Bishop C4. If I were to play Rook takes pawn, Black has a very nice in-between move, Bishop E7. I can't eat the bishop because then I lose the queen. I can't move the rook because then I lose the knight. So like if I go here, he eats the knight. If I go here, he eats the queen. And if I go here, he just takes the rook, and I'm down a rook for a bishop here. So I can't take the pawn, so I go Bishop C4. And here Daniil plays Rook FD8. Now, prior to the game, in that brief 5-minute break that I had in between the games, I actually had this position on my screen looking in chess base, and the move that I looked at was Rook FC8 here. So Daniil surprised me with Rook FD8, but again, I got a big advantage. I was up like 7 or 8 minutes on the clock, and that's what you want. You want to keep a position complicated, make your opponent think, and then they're under the pressure. So I go Rook D1. He plays E4. I play pawn to B6. I don't know if this is the right move. Just like I don't know if Rook D1 was the right move. I know against Rook C8 it was, but I wasn't sure. So he goes E4. I go pawn to B6. He goes Rook F8, and now I go Rook A2. Guard laterally. I protect the pawn from the side. Daniil goes Bishop D8, trying to win this pawn on B6. I go Rook B2 again. Dual function move. Support the pawn. Or sorry, I can't. Whoa. Oh my gosh. Why can't I draw? Supporting the pawn, but also supporting the pawn on B6. So it's, your classic... Oh my gosh, this is like MS Paint. What is wrong with me? But this is like, your classic right triangle, rook guards everything. Thank you to Callbox Stream for the 5 gifted. Thank you so much, man. I appreciate it. Thank you. Glad you're enjoying the stream. Thank you so much. So I play Rook B2, as I said before, the classic right triangle. He goes Queen H5. And the point behind Queen H5 is that Black would have loved to have taken the knight here, but when I take the bishop, I hit the queen. So when the queen moves, I push, and I no longer lose the pawn. So by going Queen H5, the threat is that if Black is threatening to take, because say I go here, he takes, he just wins the juicer. And if I try to keep the pawn safe by pushing them, Black can take, because when I take the rook, I actually lose my own rook, so my queen gets overloaded. So Queen H5 is sort of dual purpose. Again, another good old-fashioned right triangle. So I go Queen C2. Again, keep the rook guarding. I can also capture, like takes. I capture, hit the queen, and then again I can avoid losing the pawn on B6 here. So Daniil here used a lot of time, and here's where I think he made the big mistake of the game. He went Bishop F5. I don't know if this was actually losing here, but it felt like there were moves like Bishop H4 or Queen E5 or something in the position that was very unclear, and so I was a little bit surprised by Daniil when he played, whoa, thank you to Screeper0 for the 5 gifted, thank you so much, appreciate it. So I was very surprised when he went Bishop F5 here, so I played Queen D2. Again, Black would love to push the pawn, open up this F line, and then try to win this juicer here. So I go Queen D2. Again, now the pawn is protected because Black can no longer exchange for the horse, which guards the pawn, and secondarily, there aren't really any ideas to attack in a straightforward method. Magnus also said he thought Bishop was wrong. Yeah, he thought Bishop H4 also. Yeah, I mean, well, great minds think alike. What can I say? But But yeah, I had a feeling there was something because bishop f5 just didn't feel like it does. It just didn't feel right intuitively. It just feels like it just intuitively feels wrong. So I go queen d2 here, sidestep this, and I also still guard the rook. And I think now it really starts to fall apart. Like, he plays bishop e6, and actually during the game I wondered if black could have gambited the pawn here and gone like bishop e4 just for activity. I mean, maybe it's still very bad, but I thought this was the right continuation because now Danil, low on the clock, struggling to find the moves, played bishop e6, and now after knight e3, I think black is in dire straits here. So he trades, goes bishop f6, I go rook b1. Again, rook still guards the pawn, but I also protect the rook on d1, so I fortify it. He goes rook d8, and now I go b7. I don't know if this was the best move, but as the saying goes, when you have passed pawns, push, baby, push. So I play b7, threatening to capture the pawn. Danil goes d5, knight a5. This pawn, by the way, very strong, guarded by this rook behind it. Also, the knight is coming to c6, and a very, very tough position to play. So Danil goes bishop e5 here. I play pawn to g3, cut off the checkmate patterns. Queen g6. Black has to stop the jumbo fork here, but now I go queen to c2, and knight c6 is coming again. As I said in my lesson with David Pacman, when you have a passed pawn, if you can get the rook behind the pawn, it's very, very strong. You just use the rook and you just push the pawn up the board. It's just like that battering ram. So here, Danil plays rook d6 to stop knight c6, but now I go rook c1. Again, idea to play queen c8, and also just very simply go knight c6 as well, because black only has two things to attack, and I've got 1, 2, and I have my rook guarding the pawn of b7. So he goes bishop f4, tries to remove the rook from the open line, but this loses to the very neat move queen c8, but apparently queen c7 is better. Oh my gosh. Because if black goes back to guard, I just take the bishop, and if black goes over, oh my gosh, I take and I create the patented ice skater. The king has no squares. Okay, I play queen c8, which maybe is good enough, although it maybe is not. Yeah, because I realized here after the game that black doesn't have to do anything. Black can just play like h5 here. And while this endgame is probably winning for white, it's not really trivial to win this. Whoops, not that, obviously. Because white has two rooks and a knight for the queen, but the pieces are off sides, and black is kind of attacking here. So this was not precise, and now I'm actually quite mad at myself. Fortunately, Danil did not play rook g8. He plays queen e8. Now I trade, and I take the bishop. And now, again, this rook behind the passed pawn. And if black tries to stop it, now I use my knight. I remove the queen, and the rook guards the pawn. And I'm just pushing and making a grill. So fortunately for me, Danil resigns here after gf4. He missed that rook g8 move, luckily, but it was good enough. Get the win in third game, and with that, I went ahead in the match 2-1. So let's move to the fourth and final game. Let's flip the board. So this is the fourth and final game against Danil. E4, E5. Danil mixes up. He plays E4, E5, Knight C3, like he did actually in the Armageddon game against me in the finals of the Lindorus Abbey tournament. So here I play knight f6. In the Armageddon game, I played knight c6. This time I play knight f6. He goes d4, trade, queen d3. I go bishop c5. I don't know if it's the best move, but I just want to play original moves, try to keep it fast. Danil goes bishop f4. White would love to go bishop g5, but then I can take the pawn after king f2. I create a fossil here. I hit the king, and I just capture the bishop next move. So Danil goes bishop f4. Whoa, thank you to 1G Salmaran for the 10 gifted. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. So now I play d6 again. Consolidate the structure. Activate my bishop as well. It can come out. Both bishops, my snipers, are looking very delicious here. Or looking good, sorry. Not delicious, sorry. So here Danil castles, basically decides I'm going to throw the kitchen sink and just go all in. So now I play bishop takes pawn. A pawn is a pawn. As the Russian proverb goes, pawn is pawn. So I take the free pawn on f2. Now the one danger behind taking this pawn is that I do give up development. So I go bishop b6. Danil plays bishop b2. I play h6. I don't know if this is necessary, but I want to be like a rock here and just avoid any weird tricks like bishop g5 with the pin. Furthermore, if I go bishop e6, there's also maybe some knight g5 tricks to take the bishop. So I didn't really want to allow nonsense, so I thought h6 is good. Stop bishop g5, stop knight g5, and finish the queenside development, and get the king out of the middle of the board. So h3, bishop e6. There's no way I'll play Title Tuesday tomorrow, right? What time is Title Tuesday at? Chat, what time is Title Tuesday? (1 p.m. Eastern), yeah. What? What does this mean in chess? Bish, you are here. What? Sorry, confused. Anyway, Danil plays rook e1. I play queen d7. Very simple plan. Just I want to castle the king. I'm up 1 pawn here. So white really has to prove something in a hurry. So Danil goes knight d5. I take. I go knight e7. Again, open line towards the king, but I am castling my king on the next move. Or castling my king, I should say. So he plays queen b3. I play a6. Stop this very pesky bishop b5 pin. G4. Now I castle. At this point, with development finished, king out of center, up 1 pawn. Even though white has the bishop pair, a very open line in the center, and a weak pawn on d5. White really, at this point, is just losing in the game. Danil goes here. I go knight g6. Goes bishop d2. Rook e8. Again, I'm up a pawn, but more importantly, I'm up in the match. So what I want to do is get rid of the heavies. So when I say heavies, I mean the heavy artillery, like the rooks and the queens. When you have extra pawns or extra knights and bishops, you always would like to get rid of the heavy artillery because these pieces are the ones that are most dangerous. Danil goes bishop d3, going for the pin of the king and the queen. I sidestep with king b8. He goes a4. The idea here is, let's just say I play a random move like rook f8. White attacks the bishop. When I move, he can eat the pawn because my king is pinned by the queen on b3. So what do? Very pragmatic. I sidestep. I go over a5, and now I go bishop f2, and you'll notice white cannot capture. Empty space. King is not on this line where the queen was, so just very, very pragmatic. Once again, you guys, we will be doing a view arena in about 15 to 20 minutes, so that is coming up. Make sure to join that as well. So bishop f2, Danil goes rook f1, and now I go bishop e3. Again, very pragmatic. Get rid of the bishop pair. The one thing that white has here is he's got the 2 bishops for a bishop and knight. So when I go here and I bring the bishop back, the bishop is pinned to the king. So the one advantage white has here, technically speaking, just disappears because I get rid of the bishop pair. So Danil takes, I trade, I take. Again, I'm still up 1 pawn, and at this point it's close to loss. Danil goes knight d4, last gasp. Try to get the knight to e6 where it can attack the pawns on g7 and c7. Play h5, g5, knight e4. Now I attack the rook. I create the fork, hit the rook in the pawn. And Danil goes knight e6 here. I mean, I guess he could have gone rook g2 to save the pawns, but it's already such a bad position after knight c5 and just juicing in the center here that he decides just, whatever, I'll play knight e6. So I take the rook, go rook e7. The one last thing to do, bring this one piece into the game. Rook f3, I go c6. Again, try to chip away. If white captures, I can take. No support of the knight anymore. White could try c4, but I can always even just sack the rook back just to avoid any losing chances. But Danil plays knight f8. I go queen e8. Guard against this capture with the double fork. If white takes the pawn, I just take because my rook here guards against the checkmate. So he goes knight e6, and now I just take the pawn. Support is gone. He goes knight d4, and now I play rook e4, queen b6. If he were to take the pawn, I can very simply play queen to e5, hit the knight twice. Now white has to exchange the queens, and as you can see, white is way behind. He's down, I think he's down a pawn, but I also have 2 rooks against a rook and a knight, so he's way, way behind. So Danil goes queen b6, I play rook f8, and here he resigns. He could have tried something like knight b5, but the problem is I can go rook e2 check. If the king comes up to either of these squares, I take the rook with check, so he doesn't have time to checkmate. As the king goes back, I can also just check and make a draw. Queen e2, probably. Queen e2 is just winning, but there are many different ways to play this. So at this point, Danil decided to, he decided after rook f8 to resign the game. So I win the second match 3-0, and I'm now up 2-0. Again, you guys, it's a best of 5 match format, so it is not over. There are still potentially 3 more matches to go. So I'm up 2-0, but you can't get overconfident. You can't take your foot off the gas, and we will come back tomorrow again at 10 a.m. Eastern, 7 a.m. Pacific for the 3rd match. Levy will be doing coverage as always. So it's I won this second match 3-1. I'm up 2-0 in the mini matches, but it is best of 5.